Hey guys, tonight we step back into a world where the tavern wasn't just a bar, it was your dinner table, your community center, your dentist's office if you were unlucky, and sometimes your bed. You're weary from a long walk on a muddy road that mostly resembles a trench. Your boots are soaked, your knees ache, and there it is up ahead, a crooked wooden sign creaking above a low door, swaying like it's had one too many ales. You duck through the entrance, head low to avoid the splintered beam. And the first thing that hits you isn't the noise, it's the smell. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see which time zones are traveling back to the Middle Ages tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots land with a squelch on the floorboards. Wooden, sticky, and covered in something that might be sawdust, might be straw, and might be someone's idea of carpet. Your eyes adjust slowly. It's dim in here, lit mostly by a few sputtering candles jammed into old bottles and one fireplace that is far more smoke than flame. You're surrounded by noise-slurred songs, uneven clapping, the low roar of stories growing more dramatic with each retelling. A man shouts something about a pig and a monk. No one's sure whether it's a punchline or a warning. The tavern has a smell all its own. It's a thick stew of warm ale, damp wool, body odor, fireplace smoke, something pickled, something rotting, and yes, definitely feet. Historians still argue whether this scent profile was considered normal or simply unavoidable. Either way, it's intense. You move carefully, stepping over a dog that's asleep or maybe just stunned by the fireplace. Someone's boot is sticking out from under a bench. You don't ask questions. The tavern's ceiling is low. You're not tall, but even so, the beams above seem to be lowering themselves menacingly. A dried herb bundle dangles directly into your face. You sneeze and bump into someone carrying 4 mugs of ale. One spills. On you. It's warm, but not in a comforting way. You mutter an apology. They laugh. "Now you smell like here?" the person says, as though it's a compliment. Now glance around. The room is packed shoulder to shoulder with villagers, tradesmen, travelers, and a man in the corner whose only clear feature is his mustache. Everyone is talking, shouting, singing, or slumping. You count at least 2 people passed out. One of them is probably the owner. Ellis, the apprentice, you sometimes imagine tagging along for commentary, would have said, "It's like a dinner party where the soup's alive." He wouldn't be wrong. You make your way toward an open bench, or at least a spot where the bench is only slightly occupied by a sack of turnips. You give the turnips a gentle nudge. They don't object. You sit. The table in front of you is carved up with initials. Knife marks. What might be a crude drawing of a goose, and a very well-sketched tankard? The wood is slick from centuries of spillage. You place your elbows carefully, lest they stick. Someone pushes a mug toward you. You didn't ask for one. You don't know who sent it, but you nod politely and take a sip. It tastes like fermented rainwater, but with more personality. Possibly some bits of bark? You set it down gently and consider pretending you're allergic. You scan the room again. There's a chalkboard hanging behind the bar, except the chalkboard is actually a flat plank, and the menu consists of 3 words: Islay, stew, Beds. You think about ordering food, your stomach growls. Your brain whispers, "Is the stew still moving?" A man near you begins to recount a tale involving a very stubborn ox in a well. You get the feeling you'll hear this story again before the night ends. Possibly from a different man. Possibly with a horse instead. There's a warmth here, under all the grit. Not just from the fire, but from the way people lean into each other's laughter. The way the walls echo with stories no one fully remembers, but everyone enjoys. It's loud, yes, and chaotic, and probably a health hazard, but it's also something else. It's community. And just maybe, that's worth the smell. It takes a full minute before your nose starts adjusting. But when it does, you realize the tavern isn't dominated by one smell. It's a layered symphony of medieval unpleasantness, building with every breath. The first note is ale. Not the hoppy, golden kind you might find in a modern tap room, but the cloudy, lukewarm variety brewed in a wooden barrel that probably hasn't been washed since the last solar eclipse. It's tangy, pungent, slightly sour, and someone nearby is wearing it more than drinking it. Then comes the feet. You'd hope this part of the title was exaggerated. It's not. You are quite literally surrounded by feet. Boots off, stockings half dried by the fire, muddy toes wiggling under tables, and the unmistakable aroma of leather left damp for too long. A man by the hearth is actually holding his shoe up to the flame like a medieval marshmallow. The smell of scorched soul joins the growing bouquet in your nose. Your eyes water slightly. You try breathing through your mouth, but then you catch the scent of boiled onions, and old garlic, and possibly pickled radish, or something pretending to be. It's hard to tell. The food smell drifts lazily through the tavern like it's not sure where it belongs. There's smoke, too. Wood smoke. Of course, from the fire. But it's mixing with the beeswax of guttering candles and the unmistakable funk of someone's pipe that smells like burnt hay and regret. You look over and spot the culprit, an old man with a beard down to his belt. Puffing with such concentration, you wonder if he's trying to summon spirits. The strangest part? No one else seems to notice. Not the smell. Not the smoke. Not even the sticky patch you just stepped in, which might be ale or soup or melted wax or all three. Smells like home, someone says behind you, with no hint of irony. Historians still argue whether medieval people were nose-blind from birth or simply built different. Some believe people bathed less often because they simply didn't notice their own aroma. Others think it was a badge of honor, proof you worked hard and ate things stronger than your moral compass. You shift slightly on the bench and try not to breathe too deeply. There's a fresh draft of air from the door as someone else stumbles in, and for a fleeting moment, you get a whiff of outside mud, leaves, a hint of animal. It's oddly refreshing, until it's gone. Replaced again by the musky stew of tavern life. Ellis, if he were here, would be narrating your facial expressions. That's the sniff of regret, he'd say, followed by the inhale of resignation. You wonder briefly what the tavern keeper does to maintain this smell. Is it intentional? Is it like seasoning a cast iron pan, never cleaning it fully? Just letting the flavors build? The walls certainly seem to absorb it. The wooden beams overhead drip slightly in one corner. Possibly from steam. Possibly from centuries of condensation and spilled drinks. The man next to you belches. Loudly? Proudly? No one bats an eye. You smile politely. Strong ale, you say? He nods. Breakfast? Your table creaks as you shift your mug away from the edge. The surface is tacky with layers of dried meat and ghostly remnants of past meals. There's even a fork mark burned into the wood. How you choose not to ask. At the far end of the room, someone drops something. It sounds like a bowl, followed by laughter, then mild applause. Someone shouts, "Put it on the tally." You begin to notice that each table seems to have its own scent profile. Yours, ale and wood glue. The one near the fire, wet wool and scorched bread. The back corner, old fish and something herbal, possibly medicinal, possibly illicit. There's also the mysterious table near the back door. No one sits there. No one touches it. But a candle always burns there. And there's a faint scent of mint. Rumor has it, that's where the village apothecary once fell asleep mid-tincture and accidentally created the world's first spicy sleeping draught. You make a mental note not to go near it. Your stomach gurgles again. Against your better judgment. You glance toward the hearth where the evening stew is being ladled into mismatched bowls. It's a bubbling cauldron of grayish-brown, interrupted only by the occasional bobbing carrot or something shaped like a foot. Ellis would ask, "Are those lentils?" You'd answer, "I think they used to be." You decide to wait a little longer before eating. Maybe forever. A breeze rolls through the room as the door swings open again, letting in a burst of slightly less offensive air. Someone enters wearing a cloak that smells like horse and candle smoke. They nod at the barkeep, order something wordlessly with a wave, and slump into the shadows near the door. They've clearly done this before. And as strange as it all is, as overwhelming, as bizarre, as loudly fragrant, you begin to understand why people come here. Why they keep coming back. Because under all the feet, ale and questionable onions, there's something else. Warmth. Laughter. A strange kind of comfort. And maybe that's what you're really breathing in. You eye the drinks menu again, or what passes for one. It's really just a chunk of wood above the bar with 3 words scratched into it. Ale, wine, and cider. That question mark isn't a mistake. It's a warning. You decide to try your luck with the ale. Safer. Probably. You make your way through the crowd toward the barkeep, dodging elbows and an enthusiastic dancer who appears to be inventing steps on the fly. A dog barks once, loudly, under the table. You both jump. The barkeep is a woman with arms like cured hams and a scowl that suggests she's won every argument she's ever had by simply not blinking. She slams down a wooden mug without a word. Foam spills over the top and runs down the side like it's trying to escape. You take the mug, nod your thanks, and back away cautiously, never break eye contact with a tavern matron. You've heard stories. Back at your table, you inspect the ale. It's warm, cloudy, and smells faintly of overripe fruit and socks. You take a sip anyway, and it's not bad. Nutty. Thick. Hints of something floral. Possibly on purpose. And the best part, no chunks. Ellis would have said, it tastes like history. And then gagged. Across the room, a man orders the wine. Bold choice. It arrives in a chipped cup, dark as night, and immediately stains his teeth purple. He beams at his companions like this is a badge of honor. One of them takes a sip and starts coughing uncontrollably. The others cheer. Cider, as it turns out, is the true wild card. You spot a mug of it on a nearby table, fizzing suspiciously. It bubbles like it knows something you don't. You decide to keep your distance. Historians still argue whether medieval tavern drinks were actually alcoholic by today's standards. Many were weak enough to be safe from germs, but strong enough to blur the memory of goat-related misfortunes. That said, a lucky brew could surprise you, and an unlucky one could clean your sinuses in ways no apothecary ever intended. You nurse your ale slowly, letting it warm your chest. It's surprisingly filling, almost like drinking bread. The tavern around you spins onward, people laughing, singing, drinking, and occasionally collapsing forward into their soup. A traveling merchant stumbles by, mug in hand, and offers you a toast to the health of left-handed bakers. You raise your mug out of instinct. Clink, and try not to inhale too deeply as he ambles off with a hiccup and a trail of crumbs. You glance at the bar again and spot a few bottles behind it. Glass, rare, dusty, possibly filled with something precious. Or poisonous. Could be both. You briefly consider asking, but the barkeep is now polishing a cleaver. So, no. Someone behind you begins loudly debating the ale's strength, claiming it could fuel a horse cart for 3 miles. Another disagrees, saying it's weak as widow's tea. A third simply shrugs and continues sipping. The debate ends with no resolution, as most do here. You shift your mug to the table's center and feel it wobble dangerously. The table leg is uneven, propped up by a folded cloth, possibly an old sock. You nudge it with your foot. It settles, for now. Ellis would have tripped over it already and spilled everything. You're halfway through your mug when the first game of the evening begins. A group near the fire starts clapping a rhythm, and mugs are raised. It's a drinking song. You don't catch all the words, something about sheep, taxes, and soggy bread feet, but the tune is catchy. Even the dog barks in time. Someone slaps the table and calls for the strong stuff. You don't know what that means, but a bottle appears, passed hand to hand like a sacred relic. The person who drinks it immediately goes red in the face and starts hiccuping in Morse code. You sip your ale again, grateful for its quiet strength. Historians often write about mead, too honey wine. You don't see it here tonight, but the tavern walls probably remember it. Maybe in the sticky corners or in the old stains on the floorboards that glint faintly when the firelight hits just right. A man to your right raises his mug to no one in particular and announces, "To the woman who told me I'd never amount to anything." The crowd cheers. It's unclear if they're toasting her or him. Either way, someone buys him another drink. You're almost done with your ale now. The last few sips are thicker, more sediment than beverage. But you power through. It wasn't terrible. In fact, you're starting to feel relaxed, warmer, like your limbs are a little heavier in a good way. Like maybe you'll actually sleep tonight. You lean back carefully. The bench creaks under you but holds. The fire crackles. A candle gutters and goes out. Somewhere near the bar, a lute string snaps and someone says, "Finally." And as odd as everything is, the questionable drinks, the loud laughter, the medieval cocktail of smells, you feel yourself settle into the rhythm of it. This is a place where stories ferment, just like the ale, where strangers become companions, even if just for the evening, where the drinks are questionable, but the memories are strong. You slide your mug aside, fold your hands over your belly, and sigh. Maybe you'll even have another, just not the cider. A hush falls over part of the tavern, not complete silence, but a noticeable shift in volume, like the air just got thicker. You turn your head in time to see a figure striding in from the street, dust still swirling at their boots, cloak flapping behind them like a curtain in a breeze. They carry something slung over one shoulder, a lute. Tonight's entertainment has arrived. They don't say a word. Just plop onto a rickety stool near the hearth. Give a quick nod to the crowd, and start tuning the instrument with a few squeaky plucks. A few patrons groan, others cheer. One man near the bar yells, "No sad songs, I just paid off my goat," and is promptly ignored. You settle deeper into your seat as the first chords hum out. Soft and almost sweet, though the lute is slightly out of tune, which gives the whole thing a charmingly crooked feel, like a lullaby that's limping a little. Medieval tavern music isn't what Hollywood makes it out to be. Sure, there's rhythm, and yes, the occasional bawdy ballad, but a lot of the time it's just a solo performer spinning tales through rhyme. Songs about lost loves, dumb kings, overcooked sausages, or a pig who ran off with the neighbor's boot. Tonight's tune seems to be about a monk who fell in love with his reflection. You don't fully follow the plot, but there's a clever rhyme between sanctuary and Harry, and the crowd loves it. Historians still argue whether tavern songs were written fresh each week or passed down through generations like oral memes. Some believe bards composed on the spot, improvising based on crowd energy. Others suspect certain themes like cows with attitude or scandalous bishops were just too good not to recycle. The lute player finishes the first song with a theatrical flourish that nearly knocks over their own drink. Applause erupts. Someone throws a coin, which lands in the ashes. The bard doesn't flinch. You notice they've got a small, lopsided pouch tied to their belt, probably filled with coins. Maybe herbs. Possibly dice. You've learned not to ask. A second tune begins. Slower this time. The chords are gentler. The mood a little hazy. It's about a soldier who left for battle and came back with a goose. The details are fuzzy, but it ends with the goose becoming mayor of the village. You're not sure if this is satire or just a local legend. Ellis would have loved it. See, he'd say, even the geese had ambition. A few people join in on the chorus. Slurred and off-key, but enthusiastic. The barkeep briefly breaks her scowl to hum along. Even the dog sighs contentedly and puts its chin on someone's boot. Then come the instruments. You didn't notice them before, but they're here a small drum made from a hollowed log, a wooden flute that squeaks like a duck in distress, and what might be a hurdy-gurdy, although the person playing it looks like they're just turning a crank and praying. The music builds not loud, but layered. You feel it in your chest more than hear it, like a heartbeat under the ale. The whole tavern sways slightly, cups raised in rhythm. Someone spills theirs and claps anyway. A drunk man attempts to join in with spoons. No one stops him. He's not on beat, but he's having a great time. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine being part of this every night songs with no Spotify, laughter with no replays, and stories you have to remember because they only happen once. There's something beautiful about it. Crude. Yes, off-key. Often. But honest. The bard launches into a third tune, a faster foot-stomping number. You catch only fragments. Her bonnet flew into the stew. The mayor blamed the cat. And that's how we lost the bishop's hat. Every face in the room lights up. People are laughing now, fully invested, clapping in rhythm, stomping their feet, spilling ale, and singing like the next verse might just save their soul or at least win them another drink. One man stands, tries to dance, and immediately sits back down with a groan. Too much merriment, he mutters, patting his belly. You're tapping your fingers on the table now, caught in the rhythm. Even though you know none of the lyrics, you mouth along, half singing nonsense syllables like everyone else. It's impossible not to smile. Eventually, the bard winds down. The lute strings buzz one final time. A few coins clatter into the dusty bowl at their feet. Someone offers them a drink. They accept with a curt nod and take a slow, grateful sip. Play the one about the duck, someone yells. Later, the bard replies, after the stew, you feel the warmth of the music settle into your bones, nestling in beside the ale. Your foot keeps tapping even after the sound fades, like your body doesn't want the moment to end. And you realize this isn't just entertainment. It's therapy. The medieval kind with slightly out-of-tune strings, lyrics about livestock, and a room full of people who haven't bathed recently but know all the words to a song about turnips. With the music fading, the tavern breathes in unison like a large, slightly inebriated animal settling for the night. But it isn't bedtime just yet. In fact, this is when things begin to really unwind. A man stands up on a bench and announces, "It's time," he doesn't specify what for. But the regulars cheer anyway. That's your first clue that something's about to happen. And your second clue that it probably doesn't involve safety regulations. Turns out it's dice night. Not official, of course. Nothing in a medieval tavern is official unless it's the barkeep's threats about breaking fingers. But the tradition runs deep games of chance played with carved bones, wooden cubes, and sometimes small stones marked in soot. Cheating is discouraged, but mostly by getting punched. The man sets up a shallow wooden bowl on the center table and drops in 2 chunky dice. They land with a clack that echoes weirdly in your chest. He looks around, theatrically, and then yells, "Who's unlucky enough to go first?" Naturally, someone named Gregory volunteers. Historians still argue whether medieval taverns acted as gambling dens, or if dice were just a casual pastime. Some say entire wages were lost over a few games. Others argue that most people didn't have enough coin to gamble with, so they bet things like onions, socks, or a goat's future name. You sidle closer, mug in hand, curious. Gregory rolls 2 4s. The crowd makes a low noise that could mean anything from Mae to he's cursed now. Coins shift hands. A woman with an eyebrow ring shaped like a fish raises the stakes with a bet involving half a sausage and a promise. No one blinks. You notice that the dice are worn smooth. These have been rolled thousands of times. One corner is slightly chipped, giving the number 2 a suspicious resemblance to a 3. But no one seems to mind. Fairness is relative here, and luck is as slippery as the tavern floor after stew night. Someone calls out a side bet. I wager he'll sneeze before the next roll. Another counters, I bet he'll trip. They both put down buttons. Actual shirt buttons. You wonder who's walking around lopsided. The next player steps up a woman in a cloak that's seen better centuries. She throws with flair, one arm in the air like she's summoning lightning. The dice bounce, spin, and land snake eyes. The crowd gasps. She grins, shrugs, and takes a swig from a bottle that might be homemade plum wine or paint thinner. Dice aren't the only game tonight. In one corner, a pair of older men are playing something that looks like checkers, but with pebbles and what may be old tooth fragments. They don't speak, just grumble and move pieces, then grunt when one loses. The winner pockets something that jingles. You decide not to ask what it was. Ellis would have jumped into the dice game by now. "I don't believe in luck," he'd declare confidently, just before losing spectacularly and blaming it on unfavorable cosmic vibrations. Another group is passing around a tattered deck of cards. Not your modern poker variety, these are hand-painted. Some missing corners. Others featuring bizarre suits like buckets and geese. You lean over and catch sight of one card, a man with a crown riding an upside-down goat. No one explains. Historians believe card games arrived in Europe from the Islamic world via Spain. Early decks were elaborate, expensive, and heavily symbolic. But in taverns like this one, anything went if it had shapes, numbers, and some sort of rule no one agreed on. It was fair game. The room starts buzzing again. Bets fly back and forth, some coins, some favors, and one dramatic promise to finally clean out the pig pen by moonrise. Someone claps their hands loudly and declares, "If I win this next roll, I'm proposing to Gilda." Gilda looks unimpressed. "Better roll a 7, she mutters. "The dice fly? It's a 4? Next week." Then, he sighs. Behind you, someone lets out a yell. You spin around only to see a man clutching his chest, groaning theatrically. "I lost my boot money." He wails. A friend hands him a scrap of cloth. "That's your new boot," she says. "Wrap it artistically." Everyone laughs. You can't help smiling, too. It's a strange kind of joy. The stakes are low, the rewards lower, and the games make little sense. But everyone's engaged. In a world with no TikTok, no football, no endless news feeds, this is the drama. And for a few hours, it's enough. You finally wander back to your own seat, where your now lukewarm ale waits patiently. Someone offers you a die. You wave them off with a grin. Not tonight. Tonight, you're just here to watch. And maybe, just maybe, dream up your own game later, one with talking animals, a maze of barrels, and a winning move that involves singing off-key while juggling cabbage. You're sure it'll be a hit? You're not entirely sure when the food arrived. One moment, you're watching someone lose a button in a card game called The King's Left Shoe. And the next, the room fills with the unmistakable aroma of onions, stale bread, and something that might have once been meat. Food in a medieval tavern doesn't come from a kitchen in the modern sense. There's no printed menu, no line cooks and aprons, no temperature checks. Instead, the tavern's chef is more of a stewmaster/fire wrangler who works with whatever ingredients happen to not rot that day. Tonight's special is stew. Of course it's stew. It's always stew. But don't get too excited. That word covers a wide range of possibilities. From hearty and satisfying to, why is there a feather in my soup? You peer into the bowl set in front of you. The color is somewhere between beige and gray. A few chunks float, hopefully near the surface. Definitely a carrot, probably a turnip, and something vaguely stringy that might be mutton, or might not. Still, you're hungry. Everyone is, and besides, the ales dulled your sense of judgment, which is exactly how the system is supposed to work. You tear off a piece of bread dense, chewy, slightly damp, and dip it into the bowl. The flavor isn't terrible, exactly, just ambiguous, like it's trying to remember what taste used to be. Historians still argue whether taverns had access to fresh ingredients or just reheated the same stew pot for days on end, adding bits of whatever came through the door routes. Bones. Leftover bacon grease. Some say these perpetual stews lasted for weeks. Others believe that's an exaggeration, though the existence of a stew that once included both eel and apple does raise questions. You chew slowly. There's a faint bitterness, likely from wild herbs. A friend once told you that tavern cooks sometimes use dock leaves or sorrel to mask spoiled meat. You're now fairly certain you've just eaten one. Across the room, a man slurps his stew with visible delight. Tastes like Wednesday. He says to no one in particular. Another dunks an entire heel of bread and lets it sit there like a sponge in a puddle. The table next to you is having a lively debate about whether what they're eating is chicken or just something that once made a noise. Then comes the second course pies. Not the flaky, golden, Instagrammable kind. These are more like pastries forged in battle-tough crusts filled with mystery. Some contain actual meat, some dried fruit, and some are suspiciously hollow. One is filled entirely with onions. Another leaks what might be cheese. You cautiously nibble the edge of yours. The crust resists your efforts like a medieval defense wall, but eventually gives way to a filling that tastes mildly of pepper and ash. Not bad. Considering tavern food, by its nature, had to be cheap, filling, and low maintenance. You weren't here for fine dining, you were here to survive the evening without fainting. That meant dense bread, thick stews, root vegetables, and the occasional scrap of animal protein if the cook got lucky or someone hit a deer on the way in. The ale, meanwhile, is doing its job admirably. It cuts the taste of the stew, numbs your jaw just enough to get through the crust, and helps everyone forget how little actual food they've consumed. There's a communal element to the meal, too. You notice people trading bites, passing spoons, and even switching bowls mid-dinner. One man hands over his half-eaten pie with a nod, and the other accepts it like a sacred gift. You're handed a spoon by your neighbor who says, "Try mine." It's warmer on this side. You don't ask questions. You take the spoon and dig in. At one point, someone clinks a metal spoon against their bowl and declares, "I've found the spice." The room cheers. There's laughter. Jokes about the stew biting back. A brief chant of "no bones, no bones" when someone extracts what looks like a rabbit femur. The barkeep just rolls her B's and keeps stirring the next batch. Ellis always loved the food here. It builds character, he'd say, between bites, and strengthens your teeth. There's no dessert, of course. This isn't that kind of place. If you want something sweet, you chew on a piece of dried apple, or, if you're lucky, find a leftover raisin stuck to the bottom of your cup. You lean back in your chair, belly full or at least no longer hollow, and feel the comfortable sluggishness that comes from warm food, dim light, and the low hum of happy people. A dog walks by, licking crumbs from the floor. Someone tosses it a crust, and it trots away like royalty. You spot the bard again, licking stew from a spoon while humming to himself. The fire crackles. The air smells of smoke, meat, and human effort. It's not glamorous, it's not gourmet, but it's good enough. And tonight, good enough feels perfect. You shift slightly on your stool, which creaks like it's seen one too many feasts. The food's settled, the ale's mellowing your mood, and the tavern's glow is thick with stories yet to unfold. That's when the real entertainment begins. A stool is pulled to the center of the room, and on top of it hops a man wearing a feathered hat that may have once belonged to an aggressive goose. He clears his throat dramatically twice, because the first time no one notices. The second time, he gets a decent shush from the crowd and a half-thrown crust. Ladies, lords, and people with unidentifiable smells. He begins, "Lend me your ears, preferably not literally this time. You're in the presence of a tavern storyteller." In medieval times, the storytellers weren't just for royal courts or traveling troops. In places like this, a decent tale was as valuable as a warm fire or a second helping of stew. It was entertainment, history, and mild scandal all rolled into one. He begins with a classic tale of a knight who fell in love with a ghost, which, as he puts it, was mostly fine until winter, when cuddling got awkward. The room laughs, groans, and leans in. You're swept along in the rhythm of it. The storyteller speaks in a cadence that rises and falls like a lullaby laced with punchlines. He mimics accents, sound effects, and even attempts a falsetto that sounds suspiciously like a strangled duck. You sip your ale, mesmerized. And somewhere around the part where the ghost proposes with the spectral ring forged from moonlight and regret, you realize the story might not have a happy ending. Historians still argue whether these stories were based on real events. The storyteller says, breaking character for a moment, or if people just had an excellent imagination and too much ale. He winks. The crowd claps. You wonder if he just quoted a monk. After the ghost story, a woman in a patched red cloak takes his place. Her tale's different, more earthy, less romantic. It's about a cow who inherited a farm. By accident, she clarifies, the will was smudged. You're not sure how much of it is true, but by the time the cow opens a tavern of her own and bans humans for being too messy, the room is howling with laughter. You laugh too. The kind of laugh that rolls out slowly like a warm yawn for your soul. Ellis would have tried to top them. Of course, he had that one story about the constable who arrested a cart for loitering. He always claimed it was true. Witnesses swore it refused to roll. The stories continue. Some are silly. Some are oddly profound. One is just a list of strange things a man claims to have seen in a monastery, a pig wearing boots, a monk who swore in bird calls, and a door that led nowhere but refused to stay shut. And the thing is, no one's checking. There's no fact-checking, no skeptics in the corner raising an eyebrow. These tales are for flavor, not accuracy. They're seasoning for the night, like a pinch of salt over a bland stew. At one point, the bard from earlier stands up and tells a tale in verse. It's long, winding, and clearly improvised. He rhymes witch's toe with chamber pot overflow, and while the crowd groans, they applaud anyway. You're reminded of something in a world without screens. Every person was a potential Netflix. You didn't swipe to the next story. You waited for someone to tell it with breath and voice, with hands, with exaggerations passed down like heirlooms. The fireplace crackles louder now, like it's trying to join the storytelling. You feel yourself leaning in again. The room's gotten a little warmer. The stories roll on like waves, some funny, some strange, one that almost makes you tear up, even if it is about a chicken who learned to read. You blink slowly, your ale's nearly gone, your spoon's gone missing. And the stool beneath you, once a rigid plank of discomfort, now feels strangely forgiving. Maybe it's the stories. Maybe it's the magic of communal memory passed from lips to ears and back again, softened by time and ale. Or maybe it's just the onions from dinner finally kicking in. Either way, you're here, fully present in a room of laughter and smoke and voices that weave dreams from history's dust. You don't need to remember every detail. The feeling is enough, and you're starting to think that Cow Tavern wouldn't be such a bad idea. Your belly is full. Your brain is floating in a mellow fog of stories and ale, and your back is surrendered to the lopsided stool like an old knight lowering his shield. You're almost ready to sleep, almost. But not yet. Because now it's time to think about where you're going to lay your head for the night. Spoiler, it won't be a bed. Not unless you brought one. And even then, good luck finding a quiet corner that doesn't already belong to a pig or a snoring farmer. You scan the tavern. There are no rooms upstairs, no cozy suites. Just one big common area, part dining hall. Part inn, part low-grade zoo. If you're lucky, you'll get a clean patch of floor near the fire. If not, you'll find yourself squeezed between a guy using a turnip sack for a pillow and someone's cloak that smells aggressively of garlic and wet wool. The barkeep gestures vaguely toward the corner and mutters, "Find straw if you can, or just don't mind rats." You look toward the corner. There is indeed straw, sort of more like straw memory foam, compressed, patchy, and definitely shared. You shuffle toward it like someone trying not to startle a goat, which you nearly do when you pass one dozing near the fire. Medieval tavern rooms were often communal sleeping spaces. Travelers rolled into the same room, same floor, same filth. There were no walls, no privacy, just the shared agreement that no one would ask questions about snoring, muttering, or the occasional sleep-talking confession. And yet, there's a strange coziness to it all. You lay down slowly, the straw crunches beneath you. Something pokes your shoulder you don't investigate. The fire's heat drifts toward your feet. Someone nearby sighs deeply, and someone else chuckles in their sleep. Historians still argue whether taverns always let travelers sleep inside, or if some had to curl up outside with the animals. In colder months, everyone might have preferred the stable anyway, at least the cows didn't snore words. You fluff your bundle of cloak into something resembling a pillow. It smells like old ale and bark, but it's softish. The floor tilts slightly downhill, so you roll a bit, ending up closer to the fire than expected. You take it as a win. To your left, someone whispers what might be a prayer. To your right, a woman is wrapping her feet in a scarf. A child whose parents you never quite identified curls up next to a hound that has clearly done this before. And there you are. A spoon in your pocket, a turnip pie still settling in your gut, and the faint memory of a song about a ghost who eloped with a monk echoing in your ears. At this point in the evening, the tavern hums with a quieter energy. The riotous clamor has mellowed into the occasional snore, the creak of shifting bodies, and the pop of embers from the fire. You reach into your pack for something familiar, a token. Maybe a bit of cloth, or the polished stone Ellis gave you on that rainy market day. It's still there, cool and smooth in your palm. The air is thick with sleep. Or maybe it's just stew steam that never quite cleared. And yet, even here in a room where sleep means negotiating with rodents and staying warm means spooning a stranger, you feel calm. Like you belong? There's something weirdly comforting about the shared awkwardness. No one's pretending. No one's perfect. Everyone's just doing their best to not freeze or drool too obviously. Your eyes close for a moment. Just one moment. You dream of pies filled with laughter, of ale that tastes like honey, of a goat that grants wishes in exchange for riddles. And then someone coughs. You snap awake, momentarily disoriented. The fire's a little lower. The hound's moved. Your neck is fused temporarily with the cloak pillow. But otherwise, nothing's changed. You're still here. Still in this tavern that smells of feet, ale and every life story within it. And still not entirely sure if that stew had meat in it. The night thickens like an old blanket, musty. Warm in some places, cold in others, and full of the weird little dreams that come from sleeping on a floor with 100 strangers and a questionable stew still digesting. You've drifted in and out of sleep several times now, nudged awake by snores, whispers, and the occasional sharp elbow from someone rolling over. And just as you're sinking into something resembling true rest, a thud, then a louder one, then a loud voice slurring something about honor and last turn at the dice. Welcome to the unofficial midnight show bar fights, flirtations, and the medieval version of karaoke arguing about who spilled whose ale. One man stands, dramatically brushing off his cloak like a squirrel preparing for battle. Another man, clearly the worse for drink, bellows back at him from a table that's already lost one leg and is being propped up by a boot. A woman by the fire smirks, holds out her hand, and takes a bet from the guy with one eyebrow. The tavern may pretend to sleep, but there's always that one table that simply refuses. Fights in medieval taverns were as common as flat ale and wobbly stools. The mix of strong drink, fragile egos, and a complete lack of bouncers made for regular drama sometimes funny, sometimes frightening, usually fast. You sit up slightly, just enough to watch the show, but not enough to get pulled into it. The arguing duo moves in that slow, predictable rhythm of two men pretending not to want to fight while absolutely wanting a fight. There's talk of debts, cheating, someone missing chicken, and a mysterious jug of mead that may or may not have been poisoned in jest. A shove, a stagger, a tankard flies, spins through the air like a lazy falcon and lands with a soft thunk next to someone's sleeping foot. That someone doesn't wake up. Legend. Then comes the crash. Not of fists, but of dignity. One man tries to lunge, slips on what might be a cabbage leaf, and falls face first into a bench, knocking over another, creating a domino effect of grumbling sleepers and spilled coins. The crowd murmurs, more amused than alarmed. You suspect this is not the first time cabbage has been involved in a duel? A tavern maid appears like smoke, silent, sudden, and clearly in charge. She raises one eyebrow. Just one. The two combatants instantly freeze. Settle it with dice or get out, she says, voice like warm gravel. And next time you throw a tankard, throw it with purpose. The two men nod like schoolboys, return to the table, and begin rolling dice that have seen more drama than most noble families. You ease back down into your straw, Relieved the excitement didn't end with someone falling on you. Again, not all nighttime drama is so clumsy. Sometimes it's more subtle. A cloaked traveler near the fireplace whispers to a passing maid. She tilts her head. A quiet exchange of coin. A nod toward the back. You watch, but only with half a mind. This is normal. Medieval taverns doubled as informal inns, news stations, social clubs, and sometimes the kind of place where shady deals happened in corners that smelled strongly of onions. Historians still debate whether these dealings were criminal, commercial, or just desperate folks trying to trade goats for boots. Evidence suggests all three, often simultaneously. Flirtations happen too. A wink across the fire, a shared hunk of bread, a whispered joke about someone's missing sock. Romance in the medieval tavern was less about candlelight and more about the fact that if you both survived the stew, maybe you were meant to be. You notice one couple laughing together by the barrel rack. She nudges him with a wooden spoon. He grins, mouth full of turnip. Romance, 14th century style. You lie back again, smiling slightly. It's chaotic, yes. Loud, sometimes. But it's alive. And somehow, all of this fights, laughter, dice games. Secret goat trades happens without anyone blinking. It's just part of the tavern ecosystem. One man sneezes so loudly he wakes himself. He looks around, mutters, "Sheep again," and promptly falls back asleep. Another knocks over a jug with his boot. It rolls, bumps against a sleeping patron's head, and is calmly used as a pillow. There is no perfect silence here, but there is rhythm. The tavern lives its own life, punctuated by moments of absurdity, comfort, and the occasional flying pie. Eventually, the room stills once more. The dice game ends. The romantic spooning literal and otherwise settles. The cabbage leaf is swept away, and the man with the missing chicken finds it asleep in someone's lap. You exhale, the fire casting flickering shadows on the ceiling above. The snores return. The warmth does too. You've made it through the midnight madness, and somehow, you're still oddly at peace. By now, you've come to accept that nothing in this tavern moves in a straight line. Not the floorboards, not the stories, and definitely not the conversations. But just as you're settling in, one of the most fascinating and possibly terrifying elements of this place walks by and slaps a pitcher onto a table. The alewife. She's the unofficial queen of the tavern. Part server, part enforcer, part therapist, and part walking encyclopedia of everyone's worst decisions. She doesn't wear a crown, but her stained apron and no-nonsense eyebrows have the same effect. She's fast, too. One moment she's ladling mystery stew. The next she's defusing an argument with a well-aimed spoon. And then she's back behind the bar refilling a mug before the man holding it even realized it was empty. Alewives, especially in medieval Europe, ran many taverns. Brewing was often women's work, and these women wielded ladles like swords and counted coins faster than most monks copied manuscripts, while their role eventually declined with the professionalization of brewing. In this moment, in your tavern, she rules. You try to catch her eye, hoping for a refill. She glances your way, sizes you up in one blink, and says, "You've had enough unless you can still spell your own name backwards." You wisely retreat into your straw nest. tavern maids and alewives weren't just there for drinks, they were walking news bulletins, medical advisors, and occasionally matchmakers. One in the corner is currently diagnosing someone's rash using ale and half a clove of garlic. Whether it's working is anyone's guess, but the patient looks hopeful and slightly flammable. You notice a pair of maids near the hearth giggling over something scribbled on parchment, a love letter, a recipe, a poorly drawn goat. Whatever it is, they're enjoying it more than half the patrons enjoyed dinner. Historians still argue whether alewives were respected businesswomen or marginalized laborers. The truth, like most things in this smoky room, probably lies somewhere in the middle, right between the spilled cider and the man humming to his shoe. You lie back and watch as another customer tries to flirt with the alewife. Would you like to... No. But I didn't even... Still no. Conversation over. Somehow, her word holds more weight than the Lord's seal on a waxy scroll, and the room respects her for it. Occasionally, you'll hear tales of tavern maids who became legends known for their wit, charm, or ability to carry 6 tankards at once while dodging gropey hands and loose floorboards. One story claims a maid once ended a bar fight with nothing but a look and a stale roll. You're starting to believe it. A small child scampers through the legs of a bench, carrying a ladle twice their size. Future alewife in training. Or perhaps a rogue knight in disguise. Hard to say at this hour. The role of women in taverns wasn't always glamorous long hours, low pay, and the constant risk of being blamed for someone else's hangover made it a tough life. But they were often the social glue. They remembered your name, your story, and more importantly, how much you owed. One particularly sharp-eyed maid approaches your corner. "You still owe for the pie," she says, matter-of-factly. Holding out her hand, you fumble. "I thought it was complimentary." She raises an eyebrow so slowly it could be measured in lunar phases. You pay up, with gratitude. In exchange, she drops a slightly fresher pillow into your lap and whispers, "Don't use it on your face." "Trust me." You nod solemnly. Advice accepted. There's warmth here, not just from the fire or the stew that keeps trying to make a comeback, but from the people. The rhythm of their work. The humor in their eyes. The resigned way they refill mugs even while listening to the same story about a haunted turnip. For the 5th time tonight, you catch snippets of conversation. And then I said, "That's not a codpiece. That's my told you the goat was cursed." But she swore the pie had healing properties. Just background noise now. Like a soft lullaby composed entirely of mild chaos. You look again at the alewife. She's wiping the counter with a cloth that may once have been white. Her shoulders are square, her expression unreadable. But when a man down the bar slumps forward mid-sentence, she's already there turning his head gently so he doesn't snore into the breadbasket. You think, for a moment, that maybe she's the true guardian of this place. Not the landlord, not the drunk knight asleep by the hearth, but her. And in that thought, there's comfort. The last thing you hear before drifting back towards sleep is her muttering something about tomorrow's stew and if the mice don't eat it first. Somehow, that's enough to lull you into peace. Your eyes drift open again. Not from noise, but from something subtler. A shift in the air. A ripple in the rhythm of the tavern's sleepy hum. You sit up slightly, noticing that the alewife and her crew are cleaning up. Not in haste, but with a kind of nightly ritual that says the night has turned the corner. Someone's sweeping the straw, though, whether it's to tidy or simply redistribute it is unclear. A wooden cup clinks gently against another. The fire is fed just enough to keep the embers alive, but not enough to invite new conversation. You notice the door creak open, just a sliver, and a man in a cloak slips inside. He's quiet, careful. A few heads turn. Most don't. This isn't unusual. In fact, late-night visitors are part of the tavern's charm, or depending on your perspective, its problem. Travelers, always arriving at odd hours, smelling of road dust and mystery, carrying coins that don't quite match the local ones. You watch him shuffle toward the corner, where he's met not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Taverns were medieval hubs for more than just ale and stew. They were the information superhighways of their day. If you wanted to hear gossip, gather intel, or sell a chicken discreetly, this was the place. The newcomer removes his hood, revealing a head full of braids and a travel-weary face. A few patrons nod in recognition. Maybe he's been here before, maybe he just has that kind of face. He pulls out a small bag, not of gold, but of something. You squint. Herb's dried fish dice made from animal bone. The woman behind the bar barely raises an eyebrow. She's seen weirder. This is the part of the night where the tavern becomes more than a tavern. It becomes a crossroads. Historians still argue whether medieval taverns acted as true centers of commerce or simply social convenience spots. The truth is they were both, and something else too. A liminal space. The kind of place where a traveling monk could argue theology with a bored baker and nobody found it strange. At the table beside you, two men are now whispering about the river road being blocked. You can't tell if they're concerned or thrilled. Could be anything from a washed-out bridge to a troll demanding tolls again. Someone coughs. The newcomer waves over a server and mumbles something about rose-hip tea and no fennel this time. She grins and walks away. Apparently, even medieval taverns had regulars with very specific beverage preferences. The scent of warm herbs drifts back a few minutes later. The steam curls up like a gentle ribbon through the dim light. You catch a whiff, earthy, slightly sweet, with just a hint of whatever's in that back corner barrel that no one ever talks about. You're reminded that people didn't just drink alcohol here. They came for warmth, connection, and sometimes healing. Taverns often functioned as informal infirmaries. If your ailment wasn't worth bothering the local apothecary, you came here and let someone pour warm broth down your throat while telling you the ghost would leave your foot eventually. In fact, you spot a man now rubbing something that looks suspiciously like mashed garlic on his forehead, while a very old woman insists that's how she banished headaches during the Great Cheese Famine. You're not sure the famine happened, or the ghost foot, but again, who's arguing? You hear a few snores low, rhythmic, oddly synchronized, like a chorus of sleepy cows. Someone to your right has begun muttering in their sleep about taxes. Even dreams aren't safe from bureaucracy. You glance at the cloaked traveler again. He's leaned back now, sipping his tea with both hands, eyes half closed. Safe, sheltered, just like you. The floor creaks under a new arrival. A cat? Where it came from? No one knows. Where it's going? Also unclear. But it weaves through legs and tankards like it owns the place. Which, to be fair, it probably does. You resist the urge to call it something like Alapaw or Sir Whiskers, It jumps onto the windowsill, then immediately regrets it when it realizes the window is closed and the sill is cold. It glares at the room as though someone has betrayed it, then vanishes. You're not even sure if it was real, Palm, but no one else blinked. So, probably one of the younger tavern boys begins to stack mugs in a careful, half-asleep pattern. You suspect he's playing a personal game called Don't Drop the Tankard or I Have to Clean It Twice. The candles are now almost out. The fire sighs rather than crackles. And you, oddly, feel more rested than you have all week. The late-night hours of a medieval tavern are never completely still, but they do soften. The edges round out. The stories become whispers. The drinks become sips, and the strangers become familiar. You lean your head back against the wall, watching the play of firelight on the ceiling beams. Someone near the hearth is softly humming. It's off-key. It's lovely. And for once, you don't feel like a guest. You feel like part of it. At some point, you're not quite sure when the tavern shifts again. Not physically, of course, though the bench beneath you has begun to develop a curious tilt. No, it's the mood that changes. The atmosphere settles into the hush of very late night, when only the truest regulars remain, and even the ghosts, if there are any, are too tired to rattle anything. The fire's glow is low, but enough to paint everything in that gentle, flickering bronze that turns straw into gold and grime into character. You realize the alewife has disappeared, perhaps for a well-earned nap or to consult the mystical ledger of IOUs. The tavern now belongs to the stragglers, and you are proudly one of them. You notice the man at the far table unwrapping something from cloth, carefully, reverently. It's a musical instrument. You squint. Is that a hurdy-gurdy or perhaps a rebec? Honestly, it could be a misshapen spoon with strings, but whatever it is, he begins to play. The music starts soft, scratchy, uncertain, like a memory finding its footing, but it steadies. A lulling tune. Nothing dramatic. The kind of melody that could convince a sleeping goat to stay asleep a little longer, or a restless traveler to finally close their eyes. The tavern doesn't applaud. That's not what this is for. This is music for people with nothing left to say tonight. It wasn't unusual for medieval taverns to host music, though it wasn't always of the harp and ballad variety. Drums, flutes, makeshift rattles, whatever instruments survived fire, fleas, and accidental stew immersion. Historians still argue whether musicians in these taverns were truly appreciated or merely tolerated like background pigeons. Either way, they showed up, played their part, sometimes for coin, sometimes for drink, sometimes just to keep their fingers warm. You watch as one of the older patrons nods along, eyes half closed. He's not clapping, but his toe taps slowly under the table. A child sitting beside her father hums in tune, then forgets the melody halfway and begins to whisper something about owls instead. The man playing catches your gaze for just a second and offers a wink. You return it, and for a fleeting moment, it feels like you've been granted honorary membership into a very tired, very exclusive club. The song changes, drifting into a slower rhythm that seems to mimic the tavern's own heartbeat. You let yourself sink back into your patch of straw, head tilted toward the beam above you. You can see an old carving there, someone's initials, a half-finished drawing of a fish, and what might be a rude gesture or simply a very confused tree. People left their mark in taverns, sometimes literally, scratched into wood, burned into tables, painted over doors. They wanted to be remembered, even if only until the next round of stew erased their legacy. Beside the hearth, a man begins to snore loudly and with flair. No one minds. Someone throws a crust of bread in his direction as a makeshift pillow. It hits his forehead, but he doesn't stir. Another traveler, wrapped in a patchwork cloak, murmurs a prayer or maybe a poem before settling into a corner. You catch fragments of the words safe roof, warm fire, and no cursed chickens. You assume that last part is more common than you'd think. The tavern's walls groan with the wind outside, but it's a gentle kind of groan, like a sleepy yawn. You imagine the building itself is settling in for a nap, proud of another night's work done tolerably well. A young woman with soot-smudged cheeks is refilling mugs with something warm and vaguely brown. She's humming the same tune as the musician, though her version includes more kitchen clatter and an occasional hiccup. It adds texture. Your cup is refilled without asking. You don't even know what's in it anymore. Cinnamon onion. Possibly broth either way, it's oddly soothing, like someone melted the idea of comfort into a mug and served it with a side of don't ask questions. You sip. It's perfect. You glance around at the tables now. Some are empty, cleared and wiped. Some still host Little Drama as a card game here. A whispered confession there. A very intense debate about whether ducks have souls. The rebec tune draws to a close. The musician sets down the instrument gently, like it's made of glass. He stretches his arms, yawns, then pulls his hood over his face and leans back. No applause. Just the crackle of fire. The scratch of a broom. The sigh of another soul asleep. You notice your limbs feel heavier now. Not in a bad way, more like they've finally agreed to be quiet. Your breathing syncs with the rhythm of the place. In, out. Just like the wind nudging the tavern's shutters. Someone near the door mutters something about dawn. You realize it's not far off now, but no one moves. No one rushes. Dawn can wait. This moment, this quiet communion of misfits and minstrels and mismatched mugs, matters more. And you, yes, you have become part of it. Just a sleepy soul in a tavern that smells like feet, ale, and a little bit of magic. You wake, or more accurately, you resurface. The line between sleeping and waking here is blurry, as if the tavern itself encourages you to keep one foot in the dream world. You blink up at the rafters, still dimly lit by the hush glow of coals. The same fish carving is there. Good. You haven't floated too far. A rooster crows somewhere in the distance. Not near, maybe from a neighboring yard or a particularly enthusiastic mural. No one else stirs. That because in the medieval tavern, dawn doesn't begin with bustle. It begins with reluctance. You shift on the straw and realize you're not the only one groaning gently at the prospect of verticality. A man nearby, draped in a too-short cloak, stretches his legs and hits someone's abandoned lute. It makes a sound like a duck being scolded. He mutters an apology to no one in particular. It's the pre-wake ritual, stretching, grunting, redistributing joint pain, and silently praying that the floor isn't as cold as it looks. Someone finally rises and heads for the back room, likely to negotiate use of the chamber pot. That, or to check if the bread rats have unionized. The alewife returns, hair braided, apron on, and expression set to tolerant menace. She claps her hands once, not loud, just enough to stir the room like a spoon in porridge. "Up or out," she says. Everyone hears it, even if they pretend not to. It's the tavern's version of a snooze button. You sit up, blinking. Someone nearby offers you a chunk of yesterday's bread. It's surprisingly warm, either freshly toasted or recently sat on. You accept it gratefully. Mornings in a medieval tavern weren't glamorous. There was no line of croissants or barista writing your name with excessive flair. Breakfast was often whatever hadn't spoiled, hadn't been stolen, or hadn't offended someone enough to be thrown out. Today, it's pottage, a thick, lumpy stew that tastes like carrots made a deal with time and lost. It's hearty, filling, and probably contains ingredients you're better off not identifying. The alewife ladles portions into rough bowls. No one complains, no one asks what it is. Everyone eats. There's a strange camaraderie and shared culinary confusion. Historians still argue whether tavern breakfasts were a courtesy or a cash grab. Many patrons, after all, stayed overnight without coin, paying instead with labor, gossip, or questionable music skills. But offering a warm meal helped guarantee return business, and fewer fainting bodies in the street. You sip something hot, could be watered ale, weak tea, or an extremely enthusiastic broth. Either way, it warms your fingers and settles your stomach. Someone tries to start a conversation. It's early. It's about manure pricing. You pretend to need more stew. The door creaks open again. Light spills in a gray, soggy dawn sort of light that makes everything look like a watercolor of mud. A traveler stumbles in, soaked and sniffling. The alewife doesn't blink. She just hands him a rag and points to the hearth. Another day begins. You begin to notice the rhythm some patrons shuffle out with purpose, others with the energy of dropped laundry. A merchant checks his satchel 3 times. A young girl ties up her skirt and begins sweeping again, mumbling to herself in a sing-song voice about ghosts in the floorboards. You hear talk of markets opening soon, of goods arriving late, of the bishop's man asking questions again. Everyone is interested and disinterested in equal measure. There's no rush, though. Time in the tavern isn't counted in hours, but in mugs drained, songs sung, and seats warmed. You notice your own boots sitting neatly by the fire, drying from yesterday's puddles. Someone must have moved them there. Or maybe the tavern simply cares in its own gruff, drafty way. Outside, a cart rumbles past, pulled by a mule who looks like he's seen things. Serious things. Things involving mud and unfair cart-loading practices. Inside, the musician from last night is tuning his instrument again. A few notes squeak out nervous and apologetic. No one flinches. The sounds are part of the wallpaper now. And the tavern, oddly, doesn't feel like a place you visited. It feels like a place you always knew. A place that's always been waiting. Somewhere between dream and memory, where the fire never quite dies, the ale never quite runs out, and the people, well, they're weird, but they're yours. You pull on your cloak. Someone pats your shoulder. The cat, yes. Its back rubs against your leg like it's collecting taxes. You smile. Not because anything particularly joyful has happened, but because here, in the sleepy murmur of morning stew and mismatched stories, things make a strange kind of sense. And as you step toward the door, you promise yourself you'll be back. Even if only in dreams. As you step outside, the chill hits your face with that familiar medieval welcome, a slap of mist, the aroma of horse, and the damp promise that your feet will never be truly dry again. The street outside the tavern is a patchwork of mud, manure, and wagon ruts deep enough to hide regrets. You stretch and look back at the building behind you. It leans slightly to the left, as if exhausted by its own existence. But inside, it still hums. The muffled sound of bowls clinking and feet shuffling carries through the crooked doorframe. You realize that, unlike most places in the medieval world, the tavern never truly sleeps. It just nods off a bit between stews. You start walking. Slowly. Because let's be honest, no one moves fast after a night of sleeping next to a snoring cooper, a bard with suspicious foot hygiene, and a fire that smelled faintly of goat. The village around you is starting to stir, and not in any organized way. The smithy's already pounding something metal with dramatic flair, probably because he's still upset about last night's spilled ale. A child chases a goose, which is clearly winning. A woman opens a shutter and throws out what may be last week's soup or a potion. Hard to say, and yet, as you stroll past, something odd occurs to you. You miss the tavern already. Not the smell, necessarily, or the groaning benches, or the way the spoon seemed determined to launch itself into every bowl you touched. But the rhythm, the way time bent around that place, the way strangers became neighbors just by sharing bread or blaming the same drafty window, the way you could vanish into a corner and no one would ask questions unless you started growling. Historians still argue whether medieval taverns were true community centers or just places to drown fleas in ale. Some claim they fostered rebellion and ideas. Others insist they mostly fostered bad breath and worse decisions. Both are probably right. You pass another building. Not a tavern. It's too quiet. Too vertical. No moss creeping across the sign. No faded etching of a bear playing a lute. You nod politely and keep walking. Then you hear it. Behind you. Faint but unmistakable, the soft scrape of a broom, the clunk of a mug, and that same sleepy hurdy-gurdy tune. Like someone petting a cat with a violin. You could turn back, slip inside, take the same seat, ask for the same mystery stew. No one would blink. But today, you don't. Today, you keep walking because you're carrying it with you now. That tavern feeling, that strange blend of warmth, weariness, and the quiet certainty that even if your boots are wet and your stomach is confused, you belong somewhere. You cross a narrow bridge, waving to a woman carrying turnips in a basket that seems to sigh with each step. She nods. She's been to that tavern, probably. Everyone has, in some version of the story. The road stretches ahead, uneven and full of promise. You adjust your cloak and head toward the next town, the next market, the next story. Because the medieval world, as exhausting and foot-scented as it may be, is full of them. And as you go, you find yourself humming that tavern tune, off-key and unapologetic. Maybe tonight, another tavern, maybe another stew, another game of bones, another bard who forgets the second verse, or maybe, just maybe, a return. Because once you've found a place that smells like feet, ale, and trouble and still feels like home, you never really leave it behind. You just carry it with you, one clunky, cozy, oddly shaped step at a time. You follow the winding dirt road, the one pressed into place by 1,000 carts, bare feet, and a few overly ambitious goats. The morning mist is lifting now, letting the day creep forward like a nervous monk late for vespers. Your legs ache a little, not from distance, but from hours spent on warped planks and straw that crunched in ways straw probably shouldn't. Still, there's a softness in your step, like you're walking through the echo of that tavern rather than away from it. You spot another traveler ahead, pulling a cart stacked with what appears to be cabbages, no, turnips? Or are those just very confident apples, hard to tell in this light? You pass a crumbling milestone marked with a crooked X. It means nothing to you, possibly to anyone, but it feels important, somehow, like it's bearing witness to your journey one step, one yawn, one historical footnote at a time. And here's a funny thing about taverns: everyone assumes they're all the same. Laughter, fights, stew. But that's like saying all cats are the same because they nap in the sun and ignore your affection. Each tavern has its own pulse. There are ones near seaports that reek of brine and rumor, ones on the edge of forest paths that keep a chair by the fire for the local witch just in case, and tiny ones perched on hillsides where the wind whistles through the rafters like it's trying to remember a song it once heard. Some served royalty in disguise. Others hosted secret cults or illegal dice tournaments, or monks who really liked fermented cherries. Historians still argue whether these taverns truly shaped local culture or simply reflected its mirrors with warped glass and broken mugs. You think of last night's alewife, the way she balanced warmth and warning in every sentence. How her eye twitched only slightly when someone asked if the stew had onions this time. You think of the boy with the broom, how he seemed to sweep not just the floor, but the memory of every conversation that had taken place there, as if brushing the past into the corners for safekeeping. You think of the cat, always. The cat, and now the road gives way to open field wildflowers, buzzing bees, and a sky trying its best to be blue. You slow your pace, because this is the part where you realize the tavern isn't gone. It lingers, in the way your cloak still smells faintly of smoke and thyme. In the ache in your knees from that cursed bench. In the phrase someone muttered in their sleep. Don't trust the bread. It's plotting something. You carry it like a token. The kind of memory that resurfaces when you see a crooked signpost, or hear laughter through wooden walls, or find a coin in your pocket that no currency system remembers. The kind of story that unfolds quietly in your mind, long after the stew is gone and the lute string has snapped. And tonight, wherever you rest your head under stars, under straw, or back at the inn if the wind turns, you'll close your eyes. And just for a moment, you'll be there again. Feet on the creaky floor, cup in hand. The scent of something burning that probably shouldn't be, and a voice soft, sarcastic, familiar saying, "Welcome back. Traveler, your corner's still warm." Now, as your breathing slows and your limbs settle heavy into the mattress beneath you, let the images drift softly away like smoke curling up from a candle just blown out. That flickering tavern fire still glows faintly in your memory. Its warmth stretches through your muscles, unwinding knots you didn't realize you carried. You hear the gentle clink of tankards, the creak of old wood, the distant hum of sleepy conversation floating into silence. Let it all fade. Gently now. The foggy path outside. The smell of ale-soaked stories. The scratch of straw under a weary spine. You are no longer walking. You are resting, cocooned and calm, where time moves slow and soft and forgiving. Even the cat is still, tail curled around some secret it won't share. The tavern is at peace, and so are you. You've wandered through mud, mischief, and medieval misadventure. And now, at the end of the journey, you are safe. The road can wait. The stories can pause. The world can hush. Breathe in. Let it go. Sleep is near. Sleep is here. End of script. Sweet dreams.